The reason for starting the podcast originally, I actually started the podcast back in 2022. I started alongside the FIFO Inquiry into sexual harassment and alongside the inquiry into mental health in mining. And I'd come from being in mining, I'd come from having experiences, and I'd come from being a wellness advisor up on one of the mine sites or several mine sites, kind of acknowledging that there was no one spot where people can come and have a conversation about things that are difficult to have. I also found that people tend to struggle to have hard conversations. And why I started it was because something that I've been gifted or something that I'm really lucky to have is that I don't mind having a hard conversation. I don't mind being wrong. I don't mind learning and I don't mind growing. What was really cool was to have guests on who could have conversations where I was growing my knowledge. I was asking questions that I knew other people had and that I had. Listeners were able to learn alongside me. The reason why I love doing the podcast is basically having conversations or having guests on that I get the opportunity to sit down with and have a conversation with, because you don't kind of, have the opportunity with people where you say, hey, do you want to come and have a chinwag for an hour or an hour and a half with people? A lot of the time is precious for people. So sitting down, asking questions, really getting to know a guest, really getting to know, a subject matter is the reason why I started the podcast. And so that there was that one spot where people could come and learn and grow. And what I found with that podcast too is there was always something that came from it, another additional conversation that came from it. Maybe it was jarring for people and that brought up great questions from other people. And what also came from it was, I suppose, an opportunity for people to witness me growing and changing my perspective on things. And so I started it alongside that, the inquiry. But why I've started it now, why I've pivoted and why I've changed is because I've done 40 episodes and it was around workplace culture and it was great. I enjoyed doing it. I love and appreciate the guests that I was able to have on. The difference has been that I've gone up into mining as a lived experience speaker, where I go up and we deliver a mental health suicide prevention program. Pretty freaking hectic, to be honest with you. You go up. When I first started, I would absolutely shit myself going up and sharing parts of myself, because I can guarantee you when you're up in mining, or anybody who's done it, standing in front of a crew of say 30 or 40 or 50 people, it can be really intimidating with people looking at you like they don't want to be there, don't want to have the conversation, and standing up and actually having the conversation about things that had happened in my past, or conversations that I'd had throughout working as a wellness advisor, being away from friends and family, missing out on things, hearing that people were struggling with, going through a divorce or a custody battle. People were struggling with understanding nutrition or, what food to eat. You go up and you've got all of this food option where some of the days it's great, depending on which chef you get, but it's repetitive and sometimes people don't know what to have. And what that led me back to was realizing I've always had the knowledge that even as a GP or a doctor, when you go to university, you go for 5 years to study to be a GP. And in that, you only get 27 hours of nutritional education. So even if our GPs aren't having that education, we've lacked it as human beings. Having that conversation around, nutrition and physical activity and the importance of that to keeping your mental health well. I realized while I was up delivering those presentations to the room full of people who didn't necessarily want to be there, a few things. One was that they've probably had presentations before around mental health. Somebody coming up saying, hey, it's a really good idea for you to think about your mental health. And what are you 1 out of 10? Like, where are you at? And then people never seeing them again and not having an honest conversation. The reality is of mental health, and the reality is of working in mining or working in a job where it's isolating, or being a human being in general, to be honest with you, is that it can be challenging. It can be a shit fight some of the days. And we kind of have a laugh with crew when we're up on site that some days you're great, some days you're shit. And it's kind of navigating how to get through those shit days. And so I find a consistent theme of what people are going through is, financial struggle, something that I absolutely resonate with. Come from a working class family from Northern England, and class systems in Northern England are really, huge, where you are lower class, working class, or upper class, and it's spoken about a lot. And from that, I found that my understanding of finances or money, I found I was overwhelmed. So I'd have money come in, but I'd have money go out. What I would hear from my family and what I would hear from my own thoughts was that money doesn't grow on trees, that the rich get rich, the poor get poorer, that you've got to work hard for your money and you've got to trade time for your money. And I suppose it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized that that doesn't always have to be the case, that you can work smarter, not necessarily harder, and that it's important, I suppose, to pay attention to your money. Put your big girl or big boy pants on and pay attention to it instead of just spending it or having it come in and spending it. What has also been a really consistent theme as well is people's relationships.
I've realised that every single person who's ever hurt me was looking for some positive experience in doing what they did. That pain for him is entirely real. Mm-hmm. That's very much in his experience. In order to transform that relationship, we need to bring loving awareness to his pain.
So the intention was for us to stay together.
So you had the intention to stay together. You wanted the relationship to improve. You wanted to feel more fulfillment. Before we can hold those two things, the story tends to take a victim-villain, silenced, belittled, sad, angry, kind of maybe a bit ashamed that you had tolerated or not spoken up. The single most important thing for us to start with in the midst of any relationship upset is being able to pay attention to what we're experiencing. The more I accuse you, the more you defend, as you can start to feel into the experience he was having beneath the behaviour that you don't condone that really hurt you. Can you start to take it less personally?
Being a human in the world now is challenging. I think I've said that a few times. And we don't get taught how to have a relationship unless you've grown up maybe with parents who have a good relationship, or maybe they've instilled something in you, or maybe you've got a mentor, or maybe there was a teacher, or maybe there was somebody that you got to see and witness having a good relationship. But for the most part, we're not taught how to navigate romantic relationships, friendships, workplace relationships. And I find that when it comes to mental health or people struggling, that's one of the biggest things. And it's definitely something that I've struggled with. I think the longest relationship that I've ever had has been 5 years or 4 years. And something that I've learned along the way is that relationships can be challenging, but it's about making a choice to stay in it. And there's going to be financial struggles that come from that. There's going to be things that you don't necessarily agree with. There's going to be things chucked at you that are different. You didn't navigate or you didn't imagine that you'd have those struggles chucked at you. And so talking about relationships, and something else that I find really important as well is mindset, and the shift that I ended up having for that as well. Of all the things that you do, gymnastics, you've flown all over the place. Do you reckon that came from Dad as well, where it's that sense of adventure and the adrenaline?
Sometimes I'd forget to have the fun, but then I think once I lost Dad and had to go through that grieving and reflection moment, when I'm stuck in a hard decision, I go, what would Dad do? Like, just say yes, go for it, have fun, enjoy. So I did. And then I started hearing from people close to me, not the trolls. It was like, oh yeah, but that's as far as you get because you're just a girl. Got a serious elbow injury. The year leading into season 6, I could barely do a chin up.
I remember that.
I failed 20 times before I got it. A lot of people will meet me and they're like, you're so amazing. I'm like, I'm just a professional failure. Doctors say I'd never do sport. Had a hole in my diaphragm. I go through life and I pick up things that I really love about people. I just do that with people now. And then that resulted in me becoming the first and only female in the world to beat the men.
What changed for me with my mindset? I have definitely been 7 different people or multiple different people in my lifetime. What life looked like previously and what life looks like now, and what I believe has made that change, is mindset. and how I feel about myself, how I feel about the things that have happened in life and the things that are happening now. I definitely acknowledge that I used to have a really victim mindset where life was happening to me instead of for me. I've noticed that with the conversations that I get to have up on site is that what we tend to be consumed by and what I was consumed by was that I thought that I was a victim in my own life. The biggest change that I had, what the catalyst was for that change, is getting sick of my own shit. So what life looked like when I was younger, I grew up in a household with two parents who suffered with mental illness. So mum suffered with psychosis, which is 1 in 200 people. Dad suffered with manic depression, bipolar. I would say that there's probably more people who suffer with those kind of illnesses, but there's such a stigma when it comes to mental health or, especially those ones that are really hectic. So I would say there's more people who suffer with that. What it looks like when we speak about mental health, the reality is when it was great, it was great. We got to do things that other kids didn't get to do. But when it was shit, it was shit. There'd be pots and pans, plates being smashed, a TV getting thrown out the front door. I remember one Christmas, I was kind of like, what is going on? What's happening? And I thought it was my own fault. And as I grew up into being a teenager, I definitely remember being in high school and thinking, well, if mum and dad have mental health issues, I'm going to have mental health issues as well. And so, like a lot of teenagers do, I avoided being in the house. I didn't want to be in the house very much. And I started drinking and I started taking drugs. And the tough thing about that is when you're drinking and when you're taking drugs, you're not always having a bad time. A lot of the time, the reality is it seems like you're having a good time and you're hanging around, people having fun. It wasn't until, like I said, I got sick of my own shit and I realized that I was, hanging around the wrong people. But the pivotal moment for me, the thing that changed everything for me, was realizing that I was the wrong person. Like for other people who are hanging out with me, I would influence them. I'd be a bad influence on them as well. Let's keep on partying. Let's stay up. Let's have more drugs. Let's keep drinking. Let's spend all our money. Let's shout at everybody at the bar. And what that looked like for me was not having any money to pay my rent. I was kind of unable to get myself out of this vicious cycle. It's getting to a point where you realize that the only common denominator in a life of chaos or when life doesn't look the way you want it to is you. And so I realized that and I shifted my mindset. And it didn't happen overnight. I wasn't like, yeah, let's change my mindset. Let's make life better. Because the thing about when life looks a certain way, choices have been made for decades and decades, and you end up being the product of your environment and the product of your choices. And so if you've been making shitty choices most of your life, or let's be honest, maybe you've had some shitty choices made for you. Maybe, your upbringing, maybe the environment that you grew up in was, choices that were made for you. And so it takes a little while for those choices to be filtered out. It's not for the faint-hearted to change what life you're going to live or how you're going to show up in the world. But I think a pivotal moment for me, or I know a pivotal moment for me, was getting sick of my own shit. You've been under a lot of pressure in situations when it comes to playing in those teams. How do you stay so cool in those moments?
Leadership can be complex, can be chaotic, can be a lot of pressure with it. And, there's that old saying that leadership is lonely. It can be lonely.
Has there been points in your life or in your career where you've felt like shit?
But that's where you learn the most about yourself. They say that success is a pretty poor teacher and failure is one of the best teachers. So
can you take us back to a time when you felt like you weren't at your best, that you had to put all these things into practice?
Probably the big one's the turning point for me being open to the idea of meditation and mental skills. So
Ian Pryor, partner with Lizzie, to being a father.
Yeah, I guess it's a great question. I think I'm still navigating it now, to be fair, like most parents, making it up on the run.
I love your process, your little shimmy. What's going through your head at that moment? What does it look like? Talk us through what's going on in your brain.
Please go through is what's going on in my brain.
Get through. Just go through.
Yeah.
What makes this podcast different to others is I'm so people focused. A toxic trait of mine is that I care so deeply for others. And what I've really struggled with over the last 2 years is going up into mining, having those conversations, 250 presentations, speaking with 15,000 people, going up into 45 different sites and hundreds of conversations, is that I see that people are struggling. I used to be along the women's empowerment. I used to be speaking about respectful behavior. What I've learned in the last 2 years is that everybody wants to be a part of the solution. And how I went up into mining when I first started was that everybody was a part of the problem. And it just simply isn't true. There is, out of 100% of people, maybe let's say 5 to 10% of people who are not the kind of people that you want to hang around. They're making shitty decisions or doing shitty things. But 90% of people want to make the change and be a part of the change. And so what makes this podcast different is that it's people focused, giving people and empowering people to create the change in their own life, to create a ripple effect in their own life, and to create a ripple effect in other people's. And so that's what makes it different. And that's why I'm excited to have these conversations. And I'm always really open to hear what you want to listen to and what conversations you want to have. What we're going to be speaking about are all of those things put together. I've found that there's around 8 things that people need to speak about, which are finances, relationships, maybe some legal advice around divorce or custody, speaking about mental health, physical health, both of those for men, women, teens, and children, to help parents and to help people who are surrounded by those people, and to talk about mindset and leadership and lived experience and healing. So bringing all of those things together, because while you may be nailing one, you might be falling behind on the other. What I know and what I'm really lucky to be a part of is conversations that don't only change lives, they save lives. And for me, being up in mining, and for a lot of people who've been in it, maybe yourself, have experienced losing people to suicide, have experienced having to support somebody with mental illness. And if we can make a change, and you can make a change in your own life, other people get to witness that. One of my favorite quotes that sticks out for me, especially with the podcast, is when we heal our men, we heal our women. When we heal both, we heal our children. And when we heal our children, we heal the world. And that for me is the mission of the podcast, that if we can speak to everyone, we can help each other. And it can be a ripple effect. We can make waves with each other, and you get to be the change that you want to see in the world. I've been really lucky to receive a lot of different advice, but some of the best advice I think I've received is that the biggest relationship or the best relationship or most important relationship that you're ever going to have is with yourself. If you constantly feel like you're the victim of your own life, you will be. You get to make the change. You get to make choices away from the person you want to be or towards the person you want to be. And so every day you're given those options. The most important relationship that you're ever going to have is with yourself. What I have a tendency to do, and what we do as human beings, is that when we're having hard conversations, is it becomes really serious. And something that's been really important to me over the last 2 years is to find joy in the hard kind of moments, to find gratitude when life doesn't seem to be going well. So something that I do every day is write down my 3 gratitudes. And they can be simple, they can be small. I had clean water today. I got to the gym today. I got a task done that I wanted to do. We're going to have so many conversations. And if there's something that really sticks out for you, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what other conversations that you want to have, but something that might resonate with somebody else in your life. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, you've taken something away, maybe for yourself or somebody else, I would love for you to share, and I'd love to hear from you. We are always keen on having conversations that people want to have and tackling those really hard subjects. So reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining me on the Resource Podcast, where we are making a ripple effect and making massive waves.